Hi there, and welcome to the channel. My name is Kieran, and today we'll be discussing some of the most common mistakes people make when negotiating in a professional environment. Now, this is somewhat of a field of expertise for me, not only as a senior recruiter, but also prior to my professional life, I published a dissertation about the history of negotiation. So here you get all the benefit of those thousands of hours of research, and hopefully you'll find them of use. Now, before I start, I want to cover two underlying principles about negotiation, which you should all bear in mind if you want to be successful in the end. Those are that the person you're speaking to should always feel safe and in control. If you manage to achieve that, they're going to be far more receptive to your ideas, and you're more likely to successfully persuade them to whatever you're trying to achieve. In addition to this, I also want to point you in the direction of three particularly useful books that I'd encourage you all to read, again, if this is something of interest to you. The first is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He's a former FBI negotiator and gives you some really good examples of where he's used them in his professional life. The second is called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And a third, I actually have a copy here, a very well loved copy of Getting to Yes, which is one of the fundamental texts which all modern negotiation theory is based on. So again, check those out. This one in particular, it's a couple of pounds on Amazon, really worth its weight in gold. Now, before going into some of the mistakes, I also want to explain why negotiation is so important. It's very much like an investment in your life. If you don't negotiate, yes, you may advance through your career, however, you're going to go at a certain rate. It's almost like an investment that if you save over year on year, it's going to get better. However, if you negotiate, you're going to maximize each potential opportunity, and that compounds year on year on year. So the earlier you do it, just like investing, it's going to have a dramatic impact on the rest of your career. So the earlier you learn these negotiation skills, the more significant an increase in your opportunity. Going on to the mistakes, the biggest one by far is actually not so much as a matter of technique, it's a matter of confidence. And the biggest mistake is that not negotiating at all. So many people are paralyzed by the fear of loss, and they're worried that if they negotiate, they're either going to damage a relationship or they're going to miss out entirely. So when they're offered a salary or a particular opportunity, they say yes straight away without trying to maximize the potential returns you get from that opportunity. Negotiation is very much a part of business life, and again, the more you do it, the better you'll become at it, and again, and better the outcomes you'll actually obtain. Second most common mistake is the context. Anytime you're going into a negotiation, you should almost take a temperature check of the room. And particularly at the moment when the economy is in its current state, if you're going and having a conversation with your manager and aggressively pressing for a raise, it's probably not going to have the desired outcome, and you may end up burning a few bridges there, or at the very least, minimizing your opportunities at a later date. With this in mind, and focusing on the point of making sure that you do negotiate, all it is about timing. You really need to make sure that you're building value year on year on year, and that's going to keep going up if you're doing a good job. And then you choose when you try and cash in on that. If you want this and your perceived value is this, chances are you're going to get what you want. But again, choose when you cash in and make sure that it's an environment where your chances are better rather than worse. The next point is having what I call an I want attitude. If you go and say, I want a 20% raise, chances are the person you're speaking to is going to get defensive and they're going to automatically knock that down. So what you're doing is highlighting a problem to the person you're trying to negotiate with, where you should be more solution orientated, thinking about, okay, this is what I want, how can I establish a credible business case for that to happen? If you're coming in that I want, then tough. And that may sound harsh, however, business is business, and something that if we all wanted to become millionaires, no one's going to click their fingers and make that for you. You need to make it something that's going to make sense for both you and the person you're negotiating with. The next thing I want to cover is not necessarily a mistake, but it is a mindset. Anytime you're negotiating, you always want to be achieving a win-win. Therefore, it's good business for everyone. The mistake you could argue is having a win-lose mindset, whereas you're asking for a raise, sticking with that example, depending on how you position it, it could be perceived that if they were to grant that raise, you're winning, but the company hasn't got anything, therefore it's a lose for them. You could argue that by retaining your talent is a win for them. But again, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be perceived that way. So in order to maximize your chances of gaining a win-win outcome and then again, everyone's happy. You really need to position it either you're currently losing, i.e. your salary is not going up with the cost of inflation, or you've already put the work in, therefore you're losing, and to increase your salary brings you back up to parity, therefore win-win. Or you could pay it forwards and say, okay, if you increase the salary, I'll take on X number of responsibilities. But again, you really do want to make sure it's reciprocal and that you're both winning. Now, the next topic I want to discuss is objections. It's all too common that people will take the very first objection they hear in any sort of negotiation and take that as a no. Again, going back to the salary example, you've asked your manager for a salary increase, and they've said, no, that's not possible, we don't have the budget at the moment. That's an objection, and they come in all sorts, whether it's personal or professional. Personal, you might be wanting to watch a football match on a Saturday night, but your partner wants to go to an Italian restaurant instead. Again, it's an objection. What you should be doing is handling each objection as they go, and then when the person you're speaking with runs out of the objections, then you're far more likely to get a result you do want. Now, a good objection handling technique links very well with the next mistake, which is not using data when you're negotiating. Data is used everywhere nowadays, whether that's making a huge business merger or for the simplest of negotiations. You need to be employing it in order to be persuasive with the arguments that you're making. The failure to use data can significantly undermine your position. For instance, if you're asking for a salary increase, stating that the market is paying more than you're currently being paid, you're asked what that is and you don't know, it's going to completely undermine the point you're trying to make. Therefore, it's really important you do the research and employ data on your size, your benefits, use those numbers to back up the point you're making. For example, you could say that inflation has gone up X amount and your salary hasn't, you're losing out. Your top 3 competitors are paying 9% higher than what you're being paid. Again, great example of that. And again, it's only going to benefit you. But again, if you don't have that data, it could be potentially used against you. So therefore, when you're objection handling and outside of objections, when you're building your case in the first place, make sure you have a data-driven conversation. And finally, this is probably the most important it's ever been at the moment, and that's when you're negotiating, don't always just think about money. At the moment, the majority of us are working remotely. Therefore, if the answer is no to a salary increase, what else could you negotiate? Whether that's flexible hours, additional holiday, potential access to stock options in the future. These are all things that are potentially on the table, even if it's just simply a laptop upgrade. These are all things that you should be considering when you're asking for an increase in compensation. Now, looping back to the beginning of what we're discussing here, regardless of what mistake, you never want to overextend. You always want the person you're negotiating with to feel safe and in control. They should feel like it's their decision to increase your salary, not that you've strong-armed them into it. And again, with that control, you don't want to undermine them or threaten that you're going to leave to a competitor. Yes, some of these things may be implied. However, it's like the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And it's very much the same with negotiating. You can get them to the point of saying yes to your request, but ultimately they've got to be the one who say it. So there you have it, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's video regarding negotiation mistakes. I hope none of them you'll be making in the future, but ultimately, regardless of my points here, it's all about practice. And I really would encourage you all to practice because, again, it compounds over the course of your career, so the earlier you do it, the better. So as usual, everyone, if you did enjoy this video, please remember to like this video. It actually took me 3 attempts to make because my camera is out of focus, so it does take a lot of time to make these videos, and I really would appreciate some support. So thank you very much all for watching, and I will speak to you next time.